as you read through the story, you find it hard not to love him, and for some reason this book just fell extremely flat for me. I don't know, that just gave me a bit of the ick. I'm not sure how something will top this one. Hi lovelies! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Maria, and today's video is going to be my April reading wrap up. So just me going through all the books I read in April, what I thought of them, if I enjoyed them, if I didn't enjoy them. I'm basically just giving you all my thoughts and feelings for my April read. So April was a bit of an up and down month. I definitely feel like overall it was a really great reading month for me. I found some new favourites, read some really anticipated reads, but at the same time I did have quite a few disappointments as well, and we'll go through all of those as we go through the wrap up. But overall I read 10 books, which I think again is pretty good, and I do think that's why I'm starting to enjoy my reads more. I am trying to slow down a little. Usually I would read between like 10 and 15 books, but I am trying to rein myself in when it comes to just trying to speed read through everything so that I can get a certain amount of reads done in a month, because who's counting? You know, it's really only for myself. So I definitely think that slowing down and just trying to enjoy my reads when I'm in them has really helped with that. But 10 books is still a really good amount to read within a month, you know, that's still a pretty high number. But yeah, definitely think that contributed to my enjoyment and being really able to take in the books that I am reading. So yeah, that's basically what today's video is going to be about. So without further ado, let's just get into the wrap up. Okay, so the first book I read this month was actually a reread for me, and I did buddy read it with my friend Clara, and that's City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So this one, as I say, it is technically a reread. I did read this one a couple of years ago, really enjoyed it, and had intended to kind of follow on with the series and read the trilogy one after another, but for whatever reason I started the second book and I remember feeling a little bit slumpy and just not being in the mood for it when I picked it up, and ended up having a break for around 2 years. So decided I wanted to reread this one before I tried to pick up the rest of the series, because there is quite a lot of world building in here and it is quite in-depth and quite rich, so I didn't want to jump in blind. So Clara had said that she was interested in reading this, so decided to give this a reread this month, and I'm so glad I did. I really loved this one. This one is kind of influenced by a lot of Egyptian and Middle Eastern mythology, and at the start of this story we have a thief who ends up inadvertently releasing an old jinn warrior, and the story kind of goes from there. I don't want to give you too much information, but essentially in here we've got kind of other dimensions, different worlds that we may not know about, and as I say, it's really steeped in mythology, really steeped in folklore, and I think that's part of what I really love the most about this one. I think it's really rich with its world building, and I really feel like the setting is alive with history and that mythology that's thrown in there, and the way that it's depicted is so layered and rich that you really feel like you're there and you can kind of picture every scene that you're reading. Our main female protagonist, Nari, was a fantastic main character, and she's very strong-willed, she's very funny, sarcastic and witty. I think overall she's a pretty relatable character. And then we do have the Jinn Warrior who she summons, who is kind of your typical dark, broody and grumpy character, and again, just having their dynamic and watching them progress is really interesting to read. I would say that this one is much more plot and fantasy forward, so a lot more of the political intrigue is kind of what is explored in here, but we do have a little bit of a subplot of romance in here. So if you usually like romantasy and you're trying to maybe get into a bit more high fantasy, I would definitely recommend this one, because it definitely has that romance subplot, but there's plenty of that political intrigue and world building to kind of dip your toes into that more high fantasy category. So really love this one. Ended up rating a 4.5 stars, which I think is what I rated it the first time as well. So I'll be really excited to move on to the second book in this series and continue in the trilogy. Next up was my chapter 25 book club pick. So the book that we were reading this month is A Man Called Ove, and I had wanted to pick this up for quite a long time anyway. This is by Frederick Backman. So this is the second book I've read from him, and I really love this one too. So the first book I read was Town. Absolutely loved it, gave it 5 stars. And this one wasn't quite 5 stars, I gave it 4.25, but it was still really enjoyable, and still definitely one of those ones it's a lot of a character study rather than a plot. So you do kind of have to be prepared for that with this. It is much more exploring the characters within here. And within here we do have an old man who has basically got this reputation for being really grumpy, and his neighbours don't really chat with him or anything, and we're basically just exploring why he is that way, how he got to where he is, maybe why he does treat people the way that he does. And even though at the start he is very unlikable, I think as you read through the story you find it hard not to love him and not to kind of have a bit of a soft spot for him as well. And as you read through you do get a bit of a character arc with him, and just watching him change and progress as a character is really satisfying. I would say for this one just beware of some trigger warnings with regards to suicide, as it is very heavily and sometimes explicitly mentioned in here, so if that's something you would be triggered by, just be careful when you're approaching this one, because I hadn't actually realised that was a topic that was in here, and luckily I don't really have any triggers with things like that, but just if it's something that would be sensitive to you, maybe just approach this one with a little bit of caution because of that. But I think despite some of the really heavy themes that were in here, it definitely had me chuckling the whole way through at some of Ove's antics, and overall I think the feel of this one is pretty heartwarming and full of hope, and kind of just feels like a big hug of a book. So if you're wanting to try Fredrik Backman, I would definitely recommend this one. It is pretty short, so it's quite a quick read. I do think it read quite different to Bar Time, but at the same time it's written in quite a simplistic way, but somehow he just kind of really makes you feel with his writing. It's almost genius in its simplicity, that you could have all of this poetic prose, it's kind of telling you how these people are feeling, but his writing is so staccato and so simple that you don't think that you're going to get kind of this big groundbreaking feeling from the book. But he's got me every time so far in the 2 that I've read, so definitely excited to read more from Fredrik Backman and highly recommend this one. Next up is one that I'm actually really sad about, because I've been highly anticipating this one for a really long time, and I absolutely love this author and I do like the way this book was written, but for some reason this book just fell extremely flat for me, and that's Uprooted by Naomi Novik. And I'm absolutely heartbroken because I love Naomi Novik. She's one of my favourite authors. This is one of my most highly anticipated books by her because I've been told it was kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It was really magical and whimsical. And having read Spinning Silver by her, which I thought would maybe be in the same vein, I was really excited to see what she'd done with kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I think first things first is I wouldn't go into this thinking that that's what this is. That was very much like a subplot of it, and it wasn't even really done in a way that I would want that to be one of the main selling points of this book. I definitely don't think that's really what it was about. It was more about kind of self-discovery, self-worth, sacrifice and friendship. So yeah, if you're going into this thinking it's going to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, you're probably going to be disappointed. That's not necessarily why I was disappointed, but I would say that the marketing for that is a little bit off. In this one we start off in a small town where basically every year a person known as the Dragon takes a sacrifice from the town. So it's usually one of the young women, and once they're taken they are never to be seen again. And our main character Agnieszka has a friend called Cassia who everyone thinks is going to be taken. She's basically the most beautiful, the most talented, and Agnieszka decides that she's not going to let that happen and is trying to put a plan in place to prevent it. But turns out when the dragon comes to town, Cassia isn't the one that he takes. And the story kind of goes from there, but I think the main thing with this for me was that I just felt that the characters felt very flat, and I couldn't find myself connecting with our main character or any of the other characters. There was quite a lot of info dumping about the world, even though when we start off it's kind of as if the town that they live in is really secluded and there's no world around them, yet once we go to some other parts of the book suddenly there's this huge world that no one kind of talks about or is aware of, and just felt like the storytelling wasn't quite as smooth as I'm used to with Naomi Novik, and I definitely didn't get that magical feeling. It definitely felt very flat. The magic system didn't really make 100% sense, and yeah, there was just something about it just wasn't clicking with me. So I think as I was reading it I was really dreading getting back into it because it just wasn't holding my attention, and I'm really sad about that because I do love Naomi Novik's writing. I could see a few passages in here that I thought were really well written in terms of the prose and a few quotes, but just in terms of the overall plot and story, unfortunately it just wasn't for me. And I don't know if I was just slumping or if it was just a bad time to read this one, but either way I'm really disappointed that I didn't love this one. I still did give it 3 stars because I do think it was a well written book in terms of structure and everything like that, but in terms of enjoyment it just wasn't for me. So do with that what you will. But yeah, very sad this didn't live up to my maybe too high expectations, but I suppose you can't win them all. And then next up I did have another disappointment, unfortunately, and again it was another book that I was really highly anticipating. This whole month was basically books that I was really highly anticipating. That was Book of Night by Holly Black, and I really enjoyed the Cruel Prince trilogy, really love kind of the themes and the setup in there, but was really intrigued to try this because it is very different than what she's written before. It's more of an urban fantasy, it's an adult debut as well, so I was really interested to see how that kind of changed her writing style and to see if it's something that I would enjoy. And in this one we have Charlie, who is basically trying to distance herself from her past. She grew up with a con artist stepfather who basically taught her everything she knows, and she had kind of led a life of crime for some time, but as I say, she's trying to distance herself from that. However, at the start of this story a figure from her past returns and kind of ends up re-emerging her into that world, and the story kind of goes from there. And this one I am very conflicted about because I think on the surface of it I really liked the narrative and I liked the plot and the story was quite intriguing. However, at the same time it evoked zero emotion from me. I didn't feel like I was connected to the story when it came to the characters, so any twists, turns, shocks just weren't really hitting for me, even though I can say objectively I find the narrative quite intriguing. So that's why I'm a bit conflicted about this one. I really liked the dark backdrop that we had here in terms of the world that we're living in. I think it was very reminiscent of Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House, so if you've read that, it's definitely a very different story than that, but in terms of that kind of dark, every setting you were in, you were kind of thinking of like darkness, and I could really envision the world. So it did give me kind of that same feel that you would get maybe with a dark academic setting. However, when it came to the characters, I definitely don't think we were getting the development that I would usually like there, and I think again that is probably a reason I wasn't fully connecting with them. The pacing was also quite slow, which I don't mind if we are getting a lot of character development, if it's a bit of a character study, but I don't feel we were getting that on either fronts. So it just meant again, it just felt like it was quite a slog to read, and it's a pretty short book, so it shouldn't have really felt that long, but it did feel like it took me quite a while to get through this one. The main character's motivations weren't really clear until like the last 50 pages or something like that, and it just made you feel like a lot of her actions were nonsensical throughout the story, and if we were connected to her more, I think you would have been rooting for her even if it didn't make sense why she was doing things. But because I didn't have that, it was just frustrating and I couldn't really see where the narrative was going to go. There is also a romance relationship in here that at the very start we're kind of seeing it as if she's a bit nonchalant about it, but by the end we're supposed to feel that they're devoted for each other, and we just didn't see that connection because the relationship had already been built before the story starts. So again, all of this is to do with just the character development and our connection to them. I just don't feel like we got enough of an introduction to them other than their backstory. So we knew what had happened to them in their story, but I don't really feel like we knew who they were. So I definitely feel this one was lacking that. I think I may still read the second book because the way that this one ends, I'd be intrigued to see if it does capture my attention a bit more in the second book, but definitely not one that I'm super excited about now, having read this one, but one that I'll likely still pick up. So this one I ended up rating it 3 stars because again, objectively, I feel like it was written quite well. There was nothing wrong with the prose or anything like that, but it just didn't seem to be for me. So yeah, as I say, I probably will still read the second book because I think this is only a duology, so I might as well finish out the series. But yeah, probably not one of my most highly anticipated ones now. So next up, and we may start to see a bit of a theme here, so maybe I was slumping this week, I don't know, but next up I decided to pick up To Bleed a Crystal Bloom by Sarah A. Parker, and the main reason I wanted to pick this up is because I read When the Moon Hatched last year and it was one of my top reads. I really loved her prose, I really loved her writing style, I really loved how she kind of structured the story, so I was really intrigued to see what she done with this because this is a completed series. Pretty sure it's going to be traditionally published soon actually as well, but wanted to try and read it because I was interested in maybe picking up the indie copies, but thought I should at least read the first book before I decided to pick those up, and I'm pretty glad I did because I ended up rating this one 3 stars as well. But again, it doesn't mean it was bad, it just means it wasn't for me personally. With this one we've got a main character called Orla, or Orlaith they were pronouncing it, but it's spelled the same way that Orla is spelled, so I'm not sure exactly on what the pronunciation's supposed to be. And basically when she was young, she was a survivor from this attack on her village that basically killed everyone else within the town other than her, and we have this warrior who has kind of saved her from that wreckage and brought her up in this tower for all of her life in exchange for 1 drop of her blood per day. Now, one of the main reasons I think I didn't like this one as much as I maybe would have anticipated is that the love interest is the warrior who saved her, and he saved her when she was 2 years old, so essentially he's been a bit of a father figure, and I don't know, that just gave me a bit of the ick as soon as I started, and as soon as that was kind of the thing that was thrown at me. It did make me feel a little bit icky, and I'm not sure I could fully root for them because of that dynamic that was there. We obviously didn't see any scenes of him kind of bringing her up, or I don't know if he's supposed to have been as present in her life as it would seem, but it seems like they've got a pretty close relationship at the start of the book, and I don't know, it just didn't sit easy for me as a plot device, and it just meant that I felt like I couldn't fully root for the couple because of that dynamic. This did have kind of the same plot device as When the Moon Hatched, where for most of the story you're unsure exactly what is going on, why she's in this tower, why she has to stay there. She's kind of built these walls up around herself where she doesn't want to leave the tower. So there's a big air of mystery there that you're trying to kind of work out as you go through the story, and I'm not sure if because I read When the Moon Hatched and I knew that was going to be the device, if that meant I didn't enjoy this one for what it was, or if it's just a case of it wasn't done maybe as well for me personally. But I just found myself constantly looking for clues or hints as to what was going on, why things were happening, and yeah, I'm not sure if that kind of took away from the enjoyment of it. But I did really love the lyrical prose. I think it was very similar to When the Moon Hatched, so her writing style is still definitely one that I prefer. But the narrative of this one just wasn't as intriguing to me, and also, as I say, because of that love interest, I'm not sure if it's something that I'm going to be that invested in. So yeah, again, quite conflicted about this one as to whether to continue the series, because I rated it 3 stars. There's 3 books in the series. From what I understand, that is the main love interest, so there's not going to be kind of a switch, but I don't want to look too much into it because I don't want to get spoilers in case I do want to read the rest of the series. But if that is love interest, I'm not sure I'm interested. So yeah, a little bit conflicted with this one. Not sure if I will continue the series, but either way, glad I picked it up because I probably saved myself a good bit of money on buying those indie editions that I was about to buy without reading the first book. Next, I picked up Cassandra Clare's Swordcatcher. So similar to Holly Black, this is an adult debut for an author who generally writes YA fiction. So I've read and loved the Shadowhunter series that Cassandra Clare wrote. There's about 16 books in that series overall, but they're all kind of their own trilogies. If you haven't read that, definitely check that out. Absolutely love those series. But because of that, I was really intrigued to pick up Swordcatcher and see if I was still going to enjoy kind of her foray into adult literature as well, and absolutely loved this. I ended up giving it around a 4.25, which I will explain why in a second, but in this one we start off following Kel, who is basically in an orphanage and is picked from that orphanage to become what is known as the Swordcatcher for the prince. So basically he has an uncanny likeness for the prince, and he's taken from the orphanage to be brought up and trained to become basically a guard for the prince, to stand in for him when it's going to be dangerous. And through that, Kel and the prince, so Prince Connor, end up becoming very close, very like brothers basically, as they've grown up together and have a really good relationship. And within the start of this, we also have a physician called Lynn, who is part of the society within here, which has been quite ostracised because of their use of magic, and circumstance ends up bringing the 3 of these characters into the orbit of the Ragpicker King, and he offers them basically all a deal they can't refuse. And the story kind of goes from there. I really loved the world building within this one. I do feel like it was very layered and rich, and again, because it was quite different for Cassandra Clare, she's used to writing more urban fantasy, or at least that's what I've read from her. This was kind of a whole brand new world. I believe it is based on some Jewish mythology as well, but it just felt really rich and layered, and even though it was a bit of a setup book within here, I think, just for the world that we're going to explore within this series, I never felt bored. I was always really intrigued to see where she was going to go with this world and just to get every bit of detail on that as well. So I feel like she's done that really well. But I do think that the main strength in this is Cassandra Clare's talent in writing huge host of characters and making us care about each and every one, really making us feel like we know them, being invested in their story, seeing the brotherhood between Kel and Connor and kind of the sacrifices that they're willing to make for each other. And it definitely gave me the same vibes as Will and Jem from Shadowhunters, so if you've read the series you'll know who I'm talking about, but definitely gave me those same vibes, so I was all for it within here. The FMC as well was such a strong character, but she was strong in a very quiet way. You know, she wasn't forceful or kind of a warrior type or anything like that. She was definitely displayed as having strength of mind. And while she did have some I'm not like other girl qualities, I do think it was part of her charm, and it was kind of used as a device to show that she wasn't going to be contained easily and wasn't going to allow society to hold her down. There is a little bit of romance in here, but it's literally crumbs of crumbs. You know, it's a tiny amount in here, but what you do get is so satisfying. And I think if there's one thing I always say about Cassandra Clare, she is the queen of yearning, and I definitely feel like in the following books we're going to get a boy obsessed story within here, so really excited to read on about that. But yeah, I think this is for anyone who likes a political fantasy with messy and morally grey characters. It's categorised as romantasy, but I definitely think this is much more of a high fantasy, and if you go into this looking for just the romance, you probably would be disappointed, because as I say, it's very much a subplot in here. But I do think it was a really well written and intriguing story, so cannot wait to pick up the next book this month. Next up, I read The Twisted Throne by Danielle L. Jensen, and this is technically book 5 within the Bridge Kingdom series, but the way that this series is constructed is it's full of duology. So the first 2 follow one couple, the next 2 follow another couple, and this was the first in kind of the duology for one of the characters within the story. So obviously it's the 5th book, so I can't give you too much information about the synopsis of this one, but if you haven't heard of the Bridge Kingdom, it's basically an enemies to lovers storyline, pretty much within all of the duology so far. That is kind of the setup, but I do think it's done really well. It is probably more romance heavy than some of the other books that I would normally read, but I just think the way that Danielle L. Jensen does it is so good. She definitely gives you a good balance of that political intrigue as well as the romance, and just when you think you know where she's going to take a narrative, she'll definitely throw a twist in there. I think I've been surprised in each each and every of the duologies that she's brought out in this series, and I've really loved all of the love interests, and even when you think it's going to be predictable, as I say, it's definitely not. You cannot take anything for granted. So if you haven't read this series, definitely start off with The Bridge Kingdom. I think they're all really well written. I think they're pretty underrated actually in terms of romantasy. I don't see enough people talking about them. I know she brought out A Fate Inked in Blood last year, and a lot of people seem to have read that but haven't read The Bridge Kingdom yet, so this is your reminder if you haven't read that series yet. And it's almost like if you're looking for a break between some of your heavier reads, there is quite a lot of political intrigue in here, but the world isn't that convoluted. There's not a huge magic system or anything like that, so it is a bit of an easier and more approachable read. So maybe if you're starting out in fantasy and you want to give it a try, this would definitely be a good segue if you're used to contemporary romance as well. But overall, I just love this series and just want more people to read it, so definitely pick up that series. This one I ended up rating 4.25, so really solid read, and can't wait to read the next one and this one as well. Then next up I read The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith, and I just think this is one of the most beautiful covers that we've got from Fairy Loot so far. But other than that, it was actually also a pretty solid read. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and I did really enjoy this. I think it was a fun mix of kind of dark fairy tale vibes with royal and familial drama, and was a bit of a perfect mix between Bridgerton vibes as well as The Cruel Prince, which is kind of what the marketing had said about this one, so do think that it delivered on that. And in this one we follow Ivy, who is thrown into this intense competition to win the heart of the Fae Prince, and she doesn't join it because she actually wants to marry him. She actually wants to try and save her family's reputation, which has kind of went down the drain since an incident with her older sister. So she's up against, I think it's like 6 or 7 or something like that, other candidates who are all fighting for this place to marry the Fae Prince, and I've heard it's kind of similar to The Selection, which I haven't read that, but if you've read that book and enjoyed it, this might be something that you'll enjoy as well. The world in this is pretty much England essentially, so there's not too much world building or anything like that in terms of the setting, but where the whimsy comes in is that the queen is actually a fae queen as well, and within this land you do bargain parts of yourself to get something that will put you ahead in society. So someone might swap their fingernails to have perfectly straight teeth or something like that. So there was definitely that element of kind of dark whimsy within there. I think Ivy as a main character was interesting to read from. I don't think that all of her actions were necessarily understandable, but you couldn't help but root for her because you can understand why she was trying to push through and win the competition. There is a little bit of a love triangle in here, but I think from the very start you can kind of understand who's going to be kind of the winner of that. So I do think that was a little predictable, but it was still fun to kind of watch the dynamic as the story went on. And there was a twist at the end of this, which again I do think it was a little bit predictable, but it was still fun to read, and I just think this is a really strong start in what I think will be quite a fun series, and I probably will read the next book. I think it's going to be a duology. Not sure how they can make a trilogy out of this if it is going to be longer, but pretty sure it's going to be a duology, and with the way that this one left off, again, I do think it'll be a fun read, so I'll definitely be reading the next one of this when it comes out. And then next up I read what I may say is my favourite read of the year so far. Potentially is going to be one of my favourite reads of the entire year, and kind of not sure how something will top this one, but it was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. So this comes out in May. I was very lucky to get an ARC for this one, and I just couldn't wait to read it as soon as I got that ARC. So I ended up buddy reading this one as well with Clara because she also had the ARC for it, and we just had the best time buddy reading it. Within this one we're following Sybil, who has grown up as what is known as a diviner, and essentially it's her job to go into this dream-like state so that she can see the fortune for the nobles and kings and things like that. And they're basically brought up within this cathedral from they're very young up until they're around 18 or 19. These diviners are changed every 10 years, and it's coming up to the 10-year anniversary where Sybil and the 6 diviners that she's with will be able to be free and kind of go out into the world after their time as a diviner. One day this knight comes to the cathedral and Sybil isn't able to read his future, and this kind of sets off a whole host of scenarios, and the story goes from there. I went into this one definitely expecting to get a bit of a dark and moody and atmospheric read, and while I think it delivered on that, it was actually unexpectedly comedic as well, and a lot of that was down to the gargoyle character that was in here, which I just really loved. And it will sound weird, but once you've read it you'll understand why. I do think that the world building was gorgeously eerie. You know, you could really feel that eerie presence if you think about crumbling cathedrals and kind of graveyards. There was old magic and moths coming as omens, and in terms of the romance I really loved the way that it was depicted, and you can almost feel the tension from the first page. Their dynamic was electric, but it was also a slow burn. I'm not sure how she done that. It kind of felt like they were instantly connected. There was instant chemistry, but it was still a very much slow burn romance. And I really just loved watching their journey together and seeing how they progressed within their relationship. But yeah, I could probably gush about this one all day, but I just absolutely loved it. 5, 6 infinity stars for this one. I think the prose were beautiful. You know, if you've read One Dark Window, you'll know that Rachel Gillig's prose are quite lyrical and beautiful and quite poetic. That was no different here. We definitely got that delivered in this one as well, but as I say, really unexpectedly comedic, and there was quite a few times that I was actually laughing out loud. And I would say with this one, even though generally when I'm reading I'm pretty straight-faced, I don't make any emotion evident on my face, but with this one I know I was just sitting with a huge grin on my face for the most time when I was reading it. Up until the end there was a bit of a twist, which Rachel knows how to pull your heart out. But it just made me really excited for the next book. God knows how long we're going to be waiting on that one. But yeah, one of my most anticipated releases of the year. Definitely did not disappoint, and I can't wait to be able to gush about it with everybody when it comes out. Everyone I know that has read it with the ARC has absolutely loved it. I'm so excited to get my copy of it when it's out next month. And then last up, I ended up reading Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and this was a bit of an impulse purchase because I seen this edition in the works, which has these purple sprayed edges, so ended up picking this up and basically reading it as soon as I got it home. And in this one we're following two writers who have the opportunity of a lifetime to basically write a biopic about this old Hollywood star who has basically been a recluse for the last 20 years. So we've got Alice, who's our main protagonist, and Hayden, who is the main male protagonist, kind of fighting against each other to get this job. And this one was definitely more literary fiction leaning. We were getting a lot more of Margaret, who is the celebrity that they're trying to write the story about, a lot of her backstory and kind of her family's history, while also getting kind of a current timeline of the romance happening between Alice and Hayden. And I do think there was still plenty of romance within this one for any Emily Henry fans who usually go to her books for that, because with Emily Henry I do find that a lot of her books are more literary fiction leaning, and there's usually a good even mix of that. So even though there was a slight smaller plotline of mystery in here, I don't think it took away from the romance side of things at all. I would say that I wish the ending had been dragged out a little bit more. I think I would have liked a bit more time in that story and to kind of explore the feelings and emotions that we would have had at the end of it. But other than that, I think it was a really solid read. I think I rated this one 4.25. So probably not my favourite Emily Henry, but I think definitely a really strong contender for one of the top that I've read from her. So yeah, really glad I picked this one up and would definitely recommend. So that's everything. That's it. That's all the books I read in April. So as you can tell, it was a bit of an up and down month for me, but I do think overall it was a pretty good reading month, as I say, with some of the favourites that I found, finishing series, continuing series, and starting some new series from some of my favourite authors. Let me know if you've read any of these, what your thoughts and feelings were, or let me know what your favourite read was in April. I'd love to hear all your thoughts and feelings on them in the comments below. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. I post 2 videos per week, and it's videos like this, so wrap-ups, book hauls, TBR jars, reading vlogs, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye!